job.
Well, thank you. It is good to be back. And I got to tell you, this campaign is going into its 18th month. I kind of feel like I've watched Jared grow up with this campaign. He used to show up in just little short pants. Now he has a tie on. I'm sorry, Jared. It was just No, look, it's good to be back. And thank you, Mayor Jackson, for that introduction. Thank you all for being here. Thank you all for showing up, for knocking doors, for making phone calls. Thank you for believing that we don't have to let a Republican push us backwards, that we can actually get back to leaping forwards. And as many of you know, my grandparents helped raise me. Every summer I was shipped to their house. My parents' marriage was against the law, and it was illegal for them to move back to Maryland once they got married. Men fell in love with school teachers in Baltimore. But this was home, and they wanted me to be connected to home, so they shipped me back every summer. I've been thinking about my grandparents a lot recently. The way that my grandmother believes in this state. She's a 101-year-old retired Maryland social worker.
That's something.
She moved up here with my granddad at the end of the Great Depression, and my grandma, and my mom, who was 6 months old at the time. Moved into the McCullough Homes housing projects in West Baltimore. Granddad came up to work at the B&O Railroad. Grandma went to work for Planned Parenthood. She helped train a younger social worker named Barbara Mikulski. I was at the Emerge Maryland event, and Senator Mikulski walks up to me. My running mate, Susie Turnbull, is a credible leader. She isn't just part of this wave of women running for office for the first time across this country. She's helped build the wave. She was vice chair of the DNC with Howard Dean, and chair of the Maryland Party in 2010 when we created the playbook for winning this year, which you turn out more than 1 million Democrats and you win. And that's why what you're doing is so important. And she also co-founded Emerge Maryland on her porch. So I was at the Emerge Maryland event, and Senator Mikulski walked up to me. And she said, "You're Mamie Todd's grandson, aren't you?" I said, "Yes, ma'am." She said, started to tear up. I said, "Senator, now my grandmother's 101, but she's very much alive." She said, "Really?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "Would you like to talk to her?" She said, I can. I said, "Well, I got a cell phone, and she's 101, so she's almost always at home." Got him on the phone, a joyful conversation, and the senator hangs up, and hands me the phone, and gets a tear in her eye. And she said, "Well, you see how just saying your grandma's name affects me." I said, I noticed that. What's that about?" She said, "Well, she helped train me." I said, "Well, what did she do exactly?" She said, "She taught me how not to feel awkward when I was a young social worker." And my heart just almost burst with pride, because I could give 100 adjectives to describe the first woman in the United States to ever become a U.S. Senator, Barbara A. Mikulski. And the word awkward would never be on the list. Grandma apparently did a very good job. Well, my grandma taught me to aim high, to plan your work and to work your plan, and to have faith in your neighbors. You walk in my grandma's house, there's a photo of Jesus and the bishop and FDR. And the bottom line that connected all of those was the golden rule, the idea that we're supposed to treat our neighbors the way we would want to be treated. It's the conviction that unites every faith, and even the codes of ethics of those who don't believe they have any faith at all. And these are times when we have to look out for our neighbors, see ourselves in our neighbors, recognize that we're all in this together. When you travel across this state, one of the incredible things that happens is you just start to hear the same concerns over and over. And you realize, as white Republican in Catonsville put it to me after 15 minutes. He said, I'm talking to him for 15 minutes. And then he says to me, oh, well, brother, I should have told you, I only ever vote Republican. And I said, wow, I just lost like a quarter hour of my life. I don't get back. And he said, no. He said, I kept asking you questions because what you were saying was making sense. I mean, you made me feel torn. So I might have to vote for a Democrat this time. And then he just looked at me and he said, we have more in common than we have uncommon. Go across this state. And what you hear, public universities cost too much. Our kids are coming out layered in debt. When my granddad went to the University of Maryland School of Law, the tuition was $200. The late 1950s. By 1970, it was $400. Spoke to Congressman Cummings today. I said, how much was it when you were there? I think it was like late 1970s. He said it was about $800. Today, if it kept up with inflation, it'd be $2,600. In other words, it would still be just enough that if you worked all summer, say as a waiter, you slept on your aunt's couch or whatever, saved up your money, you could pay off your tuition in cash at the start of the year and never think about it again. But last time I checked, it was over $31,000. I said that at a rally the other night. We had hundreds of students out at the University of Maryland College Park, and one of them raised their hand and said, hey, I just graduated, it's over $35,000. I haven't checked, but I figured he knows better than me. The difference between $2,600 a year and $35,000 a year is the difference between coming out with no debt, you can hang up a shingle, you can create a small business, law firm, and being $100,000 in debt, you got to go work for a corporation. And pray that it all works out. Travel across the state and you hear people and they feel like the public schools are fragile. I mean, we've always are. Reasons why I'm raising my kids in Maryland is because our schools are great. Right? Proud that my kids are in the public schools in Maryland, and yet our schools have fallen in the national rankings every year the last 4 years. Since Mr. Hogan's been in office. And then opioid deaths. Raise your hand if you know somebody who's been touched by the opioid epidemic. Yeah, it's like that in every room, but half the hands go up. Up 160% in 4 years. Front page of the Sun today. Larry Hogan said he's tried everything. Apparently he hasn't. We have a plan, and he really still doesn't have one. He wants to pretend like incarceration is as important as rehabilitation for fighting addiction. Memo to Mr. Hogan, the war on drugs has failed. We have a public health crisis. We need a public health response. We don't have any more time to play on this. Travel across the state. Folks are just more economically stressed. If we had the job growth of Virginia these last 4 years, we had 40,000 more jobs right now. Their job growth happens to be below the national average. We're just way below the national average. He says he's a businessman. He's made Maryland open for business. Krish Vignaraja, she has a great future in Maryland politics. Krish said, observe, maybe he meant open for leaving. We cannot find another Fortune 500 company that has ever left Maryland because they acquired a smaller company somewhere else. Just can't find it. But that's what Discovery Channel's doing. They called him for 4 months trying to figure out how to stay in Maryland. He didn't return their calls for 4 months. Every time Terry McAuliffe, who's endorsed my campaign, and we got Obama's campaign, we got Obama's endorsement a couple weeks ago too. That feels pretty good. As governor of Virginia, the first couple years of Hogan's administration, Terry McAuliffe often found himself in a tug-of-war over companies moving to the region, and he always won. And I said, well, why'd you always win? He said, because plan beats no plan all day long, and your governor never had a plan. I mean, just think about it. In the debate, I gave him 5 minutes to describe his plan for education. 5 minutes in debate's a long time. Your mayor can affirm it. It's a long time. It's like, think about how long a minute commercial lasts. It's 5 of those. And he could not explain his plan to get our schools back to first. That's why he had to steal his apple, by the way. I was given my apple by the teachers, got their endorsement, an 8-way raise with the primary with got 85% of their support, because I met with teachers in every county in the state, including this one. Larry Hogan couldn't get the teacher's endorsement because he got him not a very good governor for education. So he just stole it, took him to court, trying to violate their intellectual property rights to the apple ballot, creating his own apple ballot. I used to give apples to teachers. Who steals apples from teachers? But for a second, I want to go back to where we all were a couple of years ago. Remember that day you woke up? I mean, not the day that Donald Trump became president, but the next day when you woke up and you realized it was not a bad dream? And we all were just sort of stunned and wandering around. And, you know, I have family members that have gone through addiction. I've never had that struggle myself, but man, I found out the value of the Serenity Prayer. I started saying it like 4 or 5 times a day. And it works. You know, I felt a little better. And one day it kind of hit me all at once. The core concept of Serenity Prayer is know what you can't control. You wake up and the far right wing controls every branch of your federal government. One thing we can control is who runs Maryland.
That's right.
Republicans only win here when we don't show up.
That's right.
And then it hit me, you know, the most important lesson I learned in college was in judo class. First lesson of judo, you shall use your opponent's momentum against them. And I was sort of marveling at all this momentum behind the far right wing. Took over 3 branches of federal government after they took over 2/3 of the states. Many of those right before redistricting, which allowed them to take over the House. 2/3 of the states. The momentum of the far right wing since the passage of the Civil Rights Act has been the states' rights movement. It's what's given them focus. They said, look, if y'all want to protect civil rights and women's rights and workers' rights and the environment, well, we'll just take the power out of the federal government and we'll put it in the states so we can make an end run around all of that. So, look, they're going to be controlling every branch of the federal government right now. I said, let's take our state back. And let's use their momentum against them. Let's take all that power they've invested in the states and let's use it to make our state a model. A model for how you fully fund education, give teachers a raise, and eliminate zip codes as determinants of children's opportunity to learn.
That's right.
Let's make Maryland a model for how, you know, we do for ourselves what Jeff Bezos and Warren Buffett want to do for the workers of Amazon and Berkshire Hathaway, and leverage our buying power and create Medicare for all and lower the costs and stretch our health dollars and make sure we all get a square deal on health care. Big difference between me and Mr. Hogan. I don't take money from the pharmaceutical companies. In fact, I don't take money from any companies. Small businesses, sure, but no big businesses, no corporations, no corporate PACs. 99% of my donations from individuals, 1% from small businesses and unions. In other words, he takes money from the pharmaceutical companies. I'm running to take on the pharmaceutical companies.
Wow.
Make Maryland a model for how we race to get to 100% reliance on clean and renewable energy so we know that we are doing our part to save our planet, to stop the sea level rise. And in the process, decide, you know what? If we're going to lead the region in the consumption of clean and renewable energy, why don't we lead the region in the production of green energy technologies? We can bring factories back to Dundalk. We can float the turbines right down the bay, install them off of Ocean City. We can build the blades out here and create thousands of jobs in each place. Wayne Gretzky said he was a great hockey player because he skated to where the puck was going. Y'all, the puck on energy production is only going in one direction. It's towards clean and renewable. We get there first. And as other states come to their senses and come online, they'll have to source from us. and our economy will benefit disproportionately. In other words, we don't have to keep talking about like shared sacrifice and tough decisions to save the environment. We just have to open our eyes to the fact that this is one of the greatest opportunities we have to create new jobs, let alone new union jobs, let alone new factory jobs, and create new wealth. Let's go do it. And we can make our state a model for getting our priorities straight. I used to talk about those tuitions going up, babies in debt. Well, what happened? Prior to 1970, mass incarceration didn't exist. Got 2 total institutions full of 18 to 35-year-olds the state's heavily invested in. One is universities, the other is prisons. When the prisons get massively bigger, dollars for public higher education goes down. When those dollars go down, tuition goes up. Tuition goes up, debt goes up, default rates go up. You know what goes down? Young people starting new businesses. The American economy, it's called the Great American Slowdown. The American economy has grown less quickly every decade for the last 4 decades. We've worried about this. I'm an investor for the last 5 years since I left the NAACP, investing in startups across Maryland, across our country. Why has our economy been sort of steadily cooling off, if you will? Because every decade, fewer young Americans start new businesses. You ask them why, number one reason, college debt.
Healthcare.
College debt, healthcare is a big one too, but college debt. And so we will, in the massive student debt crisis in Maryland, make it possible for everyone with student debt to refi at a lower rate, creating a state pool, get them out of the usurious federal rates, and we'll pay for it by ending mass incarceration. The Republicans have these crazy attack ads out there. They're like literally like a broken record. They call me the same names they called Obama, the same names that they called Clinton, because we all want to fix the healthcare system. Similar to the names they called MLK and FDR. You'll be literally a broken record. And then they pull out the old Willie Horton playbook, the old Donald Trump playbook, trying to scare people. It makes it real clear when it comes to our safety. Murders are up in Maryland statewide by 42% when you don't include Baltimore City. I pay attention to those numbers because I've had 2 family members shot in Maryland in the last 10 years. One in Howard County, he was 18 years old and ran into the wrong hombre at the gas station. And a young man who was suffering from some type of trauma and was literally afraid of my cousin who wouldn't harm anybody, but this guy was not in a good place. Reminder that we have a real mental health crisis in our country we have to deal with. Yes. And the other one was in Prince George's County. He was a senior citizen who agreed to testify against drug dealers. Larry Hogan has no plan to make us safer, so he tries to scare people. Let me tell you something. When a family member of yours has been shot, 2 emotions course through you. The first is you don't want this to ever happen to your family again. Your mind starts racing with all the ways to try to keep them safe. And the other is you don't want this to happen to anybody else again either. I teach criminal justice policy at the university level. What inspired me, I've had a family in law enforcement in Maryland for over half a century. My hero was my grandfather. My cousins today, they pick up a gun and a badge, they go to work. My granddad, on the other hand, picked up a badge, no gun. He was a juvenile probation officer. And what I can tell you is this. The governor has no plan. We keep getting less safe, so he tries to do things. He lurches, tries to bring back failed war on drug strategies like new mandatory minimum sentences. So what we need to do is not what makes us feel tough. What we need to do is what actually makes us safe. What actually makes us safe is reducing the recidivism rate. So when people come back, they're more corrected and not more broken. You use that time behind bars to make sure they come back more literate. Because if you went in illiterate and you came out illiterate, the state just played a role in making your neighbors less safe. Because if you can't read the menu at McDonald's, you can't get a job at McDonald's. And you train people for jobs that exist on the outside. And you admit that the war on drugs has failed. And you lean into alternatives to incarceration for nonviolent first-time offenders. You're trying to keep families together, get people back on a correct path. And you shift priorities away from failed strategies that said, let's focus on the low and, on the low-level nonviolent offenses. And you shift them back to the small numbers of people that are truly dangerous. Let's focus on getting killers because too few homicides result in convictions in Maryland. Let's focus on getting rapists, because last time I checked, there were 3,700 untested rape kits in Maryland. The men in the room, I'm sure, all recognize that's an outrage too. And you focus on burglars. Go back to first things first, please. And you have the courage of your common sense to listen to the officers. The most controversial thing I did early on is I said, we will legalize cannabis for adult use. By the way, it will generate enough tax revenues that we'll be able to fully fund universal full-day pre-K, which is one of the best investments we can make in the future of our state. But why did I do that? Because I listened to the police officers across Baltimore City in the midst of the storm that has raged through the city since the uprisings after the Freddie Gray tragedy. I asked a recently retired member of BPD to go across the city and listen to the police commanders. This guy had served as a captain, just retired for 15 years. And asked him two questions. Why have the killings surged since the uprisings the last 2 years, and what's been going on, say, in the last 10 years with killings in the city? So, well, none of them could really agree with the other ones on what exactly had happened in the last 2 years. He said, but interestingly, all of them offered up that in the last 10 years, they're fairly certain half the killings in Baltimore City were one set of marijuana dealers killing another set of marijuana dealers. And it's just sort of, I said, wait, can you repeat that? And they said the same thing, and I said, why? I said, well, Ben, you get it. Violence in the trade is about territory. People encroaching your territory, they get killed. So the violence in the heroin trade tends to be fairly low because it's hard to source, and so the territory is stable and very few people encroach on it. They said, but cannabis is actually a weed. You can produce it anywhere, and there's always a new set of entrepreneurs encroaching people's territory. And so there's a lot of killing in the cities, and in some instances it's cartels pushing in, and other instances just young people who don't know any better. Cross the wrong. Local gang. Well, you go look at Washington State, you go look at Colorado, and indeed the shootings have come down. Interestingly, they also go down on the U.S. border. Why? Because the cartels have become so involved. So you say to me, well, we have a substance that is no more harmful than alcohol, and there's a lot of harm with alcohol, that we can regulate the way that we regulate alcohol, and we got a lot better since I was young, and certainly since Brett Kavanaugh was a young man. And let's be clear, when Donald Trump's party is just taking control of the Supreme Court, you don't want them also appointing 5 out of 7 judges to the Maryland Court of Appeals, our state's highest court.
That's right.
So we can regulate it. And if in the process we can take money out of the pockets of gangs and put it in cartels, put it in the pockets of business people and farmers here in Maryland, and make our streets safer, and generate hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue for universal pre-K, I say that's a conversation that we should be having.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sisters and brothers, we got 22 days left. And we got one way to win. We turn out every like-minded independent. We turn out every Democrat up and down the Eastern Shore and across the state. I want to thank you for everything that you've already done. And I'm going to suggest you already know what to do. You push in as many volunteers as you can to multiply your forces. And you get everybody making every call they can, knocking on every door they can, sending out every postcard they can. And we've got this. And if I got a little bit of swagger, it's this. 1, our message massively outpolls the governor's. You tell people that you're supporting a candidate who's endorsed by the nurses to fix the healthcare system and the teachers to fix the education system, and they want to vote for that candidate, not the one who stole the apple. But the other thing is this. We're going to win this general the same way we won the primary. Many of you have been with me. You remember when they said, oh, there's no way. Jealous? What? No. There's no way he's going to win. He's lost every poll. And you saw him the next day, they're like, yeah, and he won by 10 points. Sisters and brothers, my good friend Andrew Gillum, and I've known Andrew since he was like 22. We were talking about the power of starting off in 4th place. Because we both won big. And a lot of folks have made a lot about the history that would be made if we had 3 black governors south of the Mason-Dixon. It'd be nice to be part of that. But let me tell you about the history I'm more interested in making. It's the history that happens when we fully fund our schools and we find out what it's like to live in a Maryland where genius is evident in every zip code and so is opportunity. It's the history that we make when we eliminate the #1 cause of bankruptcy in Maryland by passing Medicare for all. I gotta tell you, I'm so tired of no we can't politicians. Every industrialized country on the planet Earth has done this. I don't know. I descend from 9 Revolutionary War soldiers on one side and 2 black Reconstruction statesmen on the other, and I literally have no idea how to live in no we can't America. The only America I recognize, the only Maryland I recognize is can-do Maryland, can-do America. And folks will say to you, well, geez, these things are hard. And say to them, you know what, you're right. Anything worth doing is. And the guy we're backing for governor, unlike the current governor, actually knows how to get hard things done. I mean, think for a second, think real hard. What's a big thing Larry Hogan's actually led on? We'll get quiet. We talk about tolls. It's a good thing. They say he lengthened the school year. I get it. That's not a massive campaign to get those done. But I was named Maryland of the Year because in 1 year I led our state. 1 year. We abolished the death penalty. I led that campaign. We passed the DREAM Act. I co-chaired that campaign. And we passed marriage equality. And together with the Human Rights Campaign, me leading the NAACP, we helped get that done on the ballot too. And what's my point? That if this little state south of the Mason-Dixon could become the first state south of the Mason-Dixon to do any one of those and all 3 of those in the same year, then I'm pretty sure we can succeed in uniting the people of Maryland to finally fully fund our schools, to finally make sure all of our neighbors have health care that they can afford, and to finally create an inclusive, robust economy powered by clean, green energy. We are the party of ideas. We are the party of can-do. We are the party of RFK and FDR and Barbara Jordan and Barbara Mikulski. We go out there these next 3 weeks and we just be who we are, and we got this. Thank you and God bless.
Special thank you to the next governor of Maryland for coming down.